Thank you very much. And it is, it's always exciting to be here and get to see all you folk again. So it's been a little while since I've been here, so I just wanted to touch on some of the things that we've been up to and where we see the actions happening and where the opportunities and what are the big trends facing us. Too fast. Henry said there's not too many companies that just do resource recovery. We're another one of them. That is 100% our focus. So we like to point out we're the only company that designs, builds, owns and operates recycling facilities. Right now we're servicing about 5 million people across about 40 local government areas, and we do about 20 million 10-cent refunds every week. So the two very busy parts of our business. In terms of, it was a simple instructions where to point that, and yet, there we go. So in terms of our business pillars, we talk about the sort of the three parts of our group. And I just want to touch on some of the recent things we've been up to the last couple of years since we've stood up here and set a bit of a context for our outlook of the world. There has been a lot going on. So if I start in that middle one, the recycle part of our business, which is where we do our MRFs and our FOGO as well. Awesome Sunshine Coast MRF is up, fully operational. We've built in Hallam in Victoria a container and plastic sorting facility, which is humming along. That was a very interesting project in the fact that we had about 3 months to have that up and running ahead of the start of the Victorian Container Deposit Scheme. We've stepped in to operate the Auckland MRF in New Zealand. That is a big hooer of a facility. It's 130-odd thousand tonnes. And funnily enough, there's not a spare one anywhere else on the island, so it's a fairly sensitive asset, which is going very well. And we've just set up a new transfer station in the ACT. At the moment, the engineering team have just finishing off one of the smallest advanced processing facilities at Mount Isa. They're currently doing a bunch of upgrades in some of our other facilities, Chinder and Dandenong right at the moment. And in the middle of building another large, very high-tech MRF, a greenfield facility in southeast Queensland, which hasn't been announced yet, but you'll probably guess where it is when you see the yellow dot in a few moments. The returner team also, one I wanted to touch on. So the Victorian CDS is only 18 months old. We've already introduced some new technology that didn't exist at the time when we put that tender together, but it's been the story that we keep finding. There is lots of new technology becoming available, and being able to keep that focus on continuous improvement and what's going on. So there is a lot of cool stuff happening. That's where our facilities are currently. So the yellow ones are MRFs and beneficiation plants. There's one lonely green dot, which is a FOGO facility down in Shell Harbour, and the purple meningococcal rash is the return depots, which are the ones that have humans in them. For those of you with very good eyesight, you'll see that Canberra dot, that yellow dot there, which was the first of Re.Group's yellow dots, has been downgraded to a transfer station. For those of you who weren't aware, we had a horrific fire there on Boxing Day in 2022. A really, 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 really unpleasant experience for everyone involved, to have a complete loss of that facility. And I tell you, after getting through all of that, we're now 2.5 years down. Very proud that we've managed to keep all the material out of landfill. The only way to have been able to do that, we've had to very quickly pivot to running that facility as a transfer station. It really highlighted for us, and I think everyone's aware of the increasing risks. That was a lithium-ion battery that took out that facility, and I think everyone's aware of how often these fires are happening, how big a risk they are to our facilities. Real reminder again, as if anyone in this room needs another reminder, that what we do is essential. You can't turn off the bins, and it's pretty fragile. There's a lot of ways for things to go sideways pretty quickly, and that single site dependency would be a really, 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 really scary place to be. So you either need a really good network of your own, or you need some really good friends, and ideally you have both. And one of the things that I love about our sector, and there's many things I love about our sector, but we do a pretty good job of working together in times of crises and trying to put the community first. So thank you to everyone who was involved in that, and happy to say our team are now happily, as of the last couple of months, relocated to a new dedicated transfer station, no longer operating off the burnt out husk of the old site. And ACT is moving ahead with its plans for the new MRF there. So at some point that'll be restored. I talk about some of the trends in the designs of where we're at. This is the Sunshine Coast MRF that I mentioned. I got actually got a bit emotional last year. We won a cool award for that, an industry award, and I do get a bit emotional on some things, but that one in particular, no one outside of our room, outside of our sector, realises how bloody hard it is to actually establish new infrastructure in our space. Like, it is really, 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 really hard work, and every time something actually gets delivered on the ground, there are teams and teams of people that have worked tirelessly to overcome a ridiculous number of barriers right the way through the chain to allow that to happen. So, we should be very proud every time we do deliver something, because it is really, really, really hard work. And I think, winning the Facility of the Year award last year from our peers was an emotional moment for me. It is something that we work really hard to do, and we're very proud of what we do achieve when we get things right. So, MRFs. This is the key bits I wanted to talk around. It is not getting easier out there. It's getting cooler. Like, they are really cool facilities. They're a lot of fun. They're much more interesting to take people around than the olden day MRFs. But they're pretty hard work. There's a lot of technology out there. Not all of it's suitable for all applications, and certainly we're seeing that achieving modern market standards and moving up to this. I know when it's written down on a piece of paper, like in a technical spec, it seems like these things aren't a huge difference. Like, we've had examples where 95% recovery and 98% purity is we've independently passed that from verified people. That is a really, really, really hard bar. When someone comes along and goes, oh, but we think we could do better, and let's make that 98% or 99%, and these things that, if they're not really attached to the reality of how hard these things are, that law of diminishing returns is very, very, very real, and going up from there is really hard. That's a step change from where things were at previously, and it's really hard work to get there if you're being honest about how you're going to get there. We are increasingly seeing that there's a requirement in there also for some downstream, more specialist processing equipment to get to the really high requirements. So, for example, in the glass space, we've got a lot of experience making glass into sand. We would much prefer to get it back into bottle to bottle wherever we can. Obviously, transport dynamics are making a bit of a challenge for some regional areas. But to get it back into a bottle-to-bottle, a glass beneficiation type facilities, you require a lot of capital. Whenever you require a lot of capital, you require a lot of tonnes to make it work. So you end up with a centralised facility. I wanted to go through some of the sort of capital benchmarks. There's a few people who have been around the industry for a long time. Once upon a time, the standard rule of thumb that people had was you'd think about sort of $1 million per tonne of installed capacity in a MRF. I just went through some publicly available numbers. So this is covering buildings, plant and equipment for a couple of key projects that we know a little bit about. So Cairns MRF back in 2021, that's a 15 tonne an hour facility, and that came in, the public figure on that's $14.3 million. Also in 2021, Adelaide MRF, 25 tonne an hour, and that's at a $24 million sticker price. So both of those are kind of in that, $1 million per tonne of installed capacity. You then step forward a couple of years, Sunshine Coast MRF, which is very similar to Adelaide, except it came, after the COVID dramas, or in the middle of the COVID dramas, and with a few additional upgrades, particularly on the glass treatment. So it has a cullet recovery line on it. It's 25 tonne an hour. 2023, it's $40.5 million. Now, the little one that I mentioned at the start of this, Mount Isa has been publicising its project. It's a 3 tonne an hour facility at $20 million, which is a very expensive. And I've got to say that's fantastic. I think it's awesome that that community decided that it's not just about the cost. They saw a value in doing this locally. At the same time, I sit here and I go, we used to build lots of regional small recycling facilities. I don't see us building a whole heap of them in the future at those sort of numbers. That is a really hard barrier to get over when you're talking about very, very large numbers for a couple of thousand tonnes. Overall trends we're seeing, it is consolidating towards existing facilities, upgrading existing facilities compared to the cost of going and starting again. Not to mention the complexity and the time. We've talked a lot about planning constraints in New South Wales, but it is really, really, really hard work to actually get a new facility up across the line. So getting the most out of existing facilities, the upgrades and the opportunities to improve on what's there and build on what's there and avoid some of that additional cost and complexity is certainly one of the trends that we're seeing and one of the things that we're doing across our business. So with all that cool technology, there's some exciting parts of that. So across all of those facilities, and we've got multiple optical sorters. That Sunshine Coast facility has 7 optics in there. It is gathering a huge amount of data. So there is more rich information than we've ever had before around what is actually in the waste stream, how we're recovering it. I don't think that we're using that data to its fullest extent now, but as I look ahead, in an AI-driven world, having access to that information and that data, I'm sure it's going to help us do better over the future. Some of the other bits that are great, fantastic when you're taking a community tour, robotics. Robotics are certainly one of the sexiest things you can put into a MRF these days. Not necessarily super efficient right at the moment. We see a really good role for them in quality control areas, so we're using them in our facilities on the QC. That is, I don't know if anyone's ever worked in a MRF, but in terms of mind-numbing, horribly boring jobs that you'd rather automate and have the safety benefits, sitting there just before the baler, making sure that you're getting those last couple of bits that weren't supposed to be in the material. That's a great role for robots. Trying to use them, everyone tries to look at the front end. How could we automate pre-sort to attack batteries or pull out some of this other contamination? That's a really, really, really hard role for a robot. That's not. I don't think that's going to happen in the very near future, which is why we'll get to the need to make sure we're improving what's actually coming into our facilities. In terms of the plastic stream, obviously a lot of focus there. I think the future is going to be largely around food grade versus non-food grade. So currently in these facilities, we sort to 5 different plastic types, but within that, or 5 grades. But we have a HDPE coloured, HDPE clear. I think that we'll stop talking about colours and more about the food grade PET, the food grade HDPE versus the non-food grade materials. That's certainly. I have the pleasure of sitting in some of the UPCO meetings, and that's certainly where the brand owners are looking, and how do we change the packaging design to make that easier. I think that linking up at the front and the back end of the chain is a really important thing. The other one I forgot to mention, after having talked about a horrific fire, in those MRFs now, we're seeing the fire control systems are probably like 10% of your capital costs. That didn't exist 5 years ago. No one was putting sprinklers underneath every conveyor and putting cannons throughout and having a ridiculous amount of water storage. It's one of those major cost increases, but the flip side of that, we need to get our insurance for our facilities, and that's pretty hard and pretty expensive these days as well. I feel like I just made that all sound really hard and terrible. It's fun. Like, there's lots of really cool things happening. It's just really, really expensive and complicated. yeah, it is complex. It is getting more and more complex. It is getting more and more expensive. That said, it is achieving a better outcome and it's doing a better job than what we were able to do before. So I guess that's a good thing. Right, MRFs aren't getting easier, but container returns are getting easier. I love CDS container returns. I love them as part of our business. Oop, didn't mean to press that. Anyway, you get to watch this on loop for a few times. I love them for what they are for themselves, but more to the point, I love the demonstration of that product stewardship principle. I love that we have these schemes that are mandatory product stewardship, so there's no free riders. Everyone who's supplying these materials into the market are paying an appropriate cost to have them recovered in a best practice way. And I look at what we've achieved collectively in these programs. It is phenomenal, the step change we've done. The example I always come back to is aluminium cans. Everyone knew an aluminium can was recyclable, of the one thing that everyone knew, and yet we doubled recovery rates by putting a 10% refund on them. It's not just about education. We have to actually provide some proper incentives for people to get these things. So I look at CDS as a great role model for a whole slew of other products that shouldn't be in the bins because they're too dangerous or they're too valuable or they're too important. And looking at how do we build out these dedicated streams, how do we leverage more off things like these depots. So this video, I should have actually mentioned it before you knew what you were looking at. This is really cool. We work very closely with Machinex. They're a Canadian-based technology supplier. We've been running the CDS and the ACT since 2018, and we've been through a lot of different iterations of technology through that couple of years as we have across our networks. But we had a sort of a dream list of this is what we'd like to achieve. What we want, the ultimate convenience for customers would be just tip bulk containers in, have them super quickly, super accurately counted and verified, and worked with Machinex to bring that to life. So the container, which I love the Canadians, but their naming conventions aren't that fantastic, to be completely honest. Anyway, the AI in the middle is the hint. It is a very smart bit of kit. I think we're saying that it does 600 containers a minute. It actually will do up to 1,500 containers a minute. You just got to get the back end to keep up with the front end. It is phenomenally cool bit of kit and really good. So it's not barcode dependent. It's got a database in there that's allowing it a broader range of ways that it verifies things. You can't quite see it, but you see little green ticks and little red crosses if there's anything that's not eligible as it comes through there. The cool thing about AI, just to talk about some of these technology systems, one of the really cool things is you have to train them. We had to take its little brain to Canberra for a couple of months and for it to sit there and look at what does every eligible container look like. Once you've trained it once though, it's a copy paste to the next one. It's unlike a worker who comes in and then on Thursdays they're sick and you're trying to train someone else again. Once you've gone through the process of training this, it doesn't forget, it just gets smarter and you can just replicate that again, which is the same as we see with all the other technologies. The more you're using them, the more efficient you can tweak them and get them moving. I feel like I'm running long. I'll pick up the pace, even though you're being very polite. Thank you. So look, overall, when I sort of look at the three parts of the chain as I see it, I'm really positive about the shifts that are happening with brand owners. I think that, and I've been very critical of APCO over many years, but I think that the direction that they're on at the moment is really exciting for us. I think that, I hope that the election result allows them to actually get into that a bit quicker. It's been stalled. I think Michael gave us a good reminder that amazing things can happen in 3 or 4 years if you get the right people incentivised to do stuff. So I hope that we're about to hit a period where we actually get some important stuff done, because it's a bit frustrating when we're all in a hurry and things aren't moving. So I'm positive and optimistic, and I think that the front end is realising the shared responsibility and the fact that we can't just do it at the end of the pipe. You know, they need to be involved in this system as well. I think that in the middle, I think that, you know, we and others are demonstrating, you know, I think as a sector, we've taken step change forward. I think, you know, we're doing better with the materials that we've got. And I think that how we're doing it and what we do, I think we're getting better and better at that. That said, I think, you know, we've got a big issue with the community. I think we've had a big trust issue with the community. And I think there's a lot more work to do. I'm very lucky to be talking before Anne and Rachel, but I'm sure that we'll hear some data-driven. I will say that Garth's observations is that it's getting worse. You know, it's certainly not getting better. If the most positive view would be that it's plateauing, I think our contamination rates are getting worse. I think our yields of recycling are getting worse. We're seeing less volume and more of the bad material coming through to us. So we have to get better at doing that. We have to get simpler education messages. We have to get, as a sector, we have to do a better job because, you know, especially as these things get more complex and more expensive, we can't afford to lose them. We can't keep having dangerous items thrown at us, and you know, there's a real need to join that loop back up. I think we've kind of dropped the ball on that as a broader sense. I know there's a lot of people, individuals and councils that are doing a great job, but to me it feels like it's slipping. And I think that partnership, shared responsibility part is really, really, really important. And we need to get back to all of us being aligned at trying to make this better, which just quietly, contracts, we need to stop having silly contracts that, you know, don't create that alignment, that we have, you know, contracts that actually reflect that and have everyone aligned and heading in the same direction. Contracts where people are saying, well, you know, all care, no responsibility, deal with whatever we throw at you and good luck, don't help take us forward. You know, we need to have proper alignment in how we're doing this if we're going to actually make headway and get things better. So that's it. We like partnerships, and thank you.